The timer starts. You don't get a moment to process what just happened. The baby is gone, and Zebes is burning, and there is nothing to do but run. So you do. Through every corridor you spent 10 hours learning, the shortcuts that used to feel like yours, the rooms you got lost in, the ones you eventually stopped getting lost in. Everything is now on fire, and none of it slows down for you. You reach your ship, you escape. The map you spent hours filling in, room by room, upgrade by upgrade, one dark blue silhouette lit up at a time, is ash. You didn't get to keep it. You are never going to. This is Super Metroid. I actually played this game for the first time recently after a best friend told me I should cover it. It's his favorite game ever. He's waited quite a while, but it finally felt like time. So as for nostalgia, I don't have that. What I do have is the experience of someone who came in cold and got quietly taken apart by a 30-year-old Super NES game. It grabbed me, shook me, and I needed to figure out why. My skepticism was heavy. You see, I'm not intrinsically motivated in video games. I need a goal, a story, characters I actually care about. External reasons to keep moving. Super Metroid has almost none of that on the surface. No points, no currency, no level up, no score screen at the end of a level. Just a planet, a bounty hunter, and a baby creature someone stole from her. So why couldn't I stop? I'm going to show you how the game's exploration mechanics are a deliberate construction. Not just good game design, but a trap. A very patient, very carefully built trap. And by the time we get to the ending, I think you'll understand why losing Zebes hurts the way it does as well. Whether you played this game at launch, last week, or never, it's time to explore the depths of Super Metroid. The first thing you notice once landing on Zebes is that nothing is telling you where to go, and yet you go anyway. Why is that? It's because Super Metroid runs on three things: curiosity, surprise, and reward. And the reason you can't put it down is that the reward is never the end of the question. It's the start of the next one. That sounds simple, deceptively so. To build a game around that is difficult. Most games understand two of these three. They can surprise you, and they can reward you. What they consistently fail at is keeping the curiosity alive after their reward is in your hand. You get a new ability, that new weapon, the new area unlocks, and that loop closes. Questions answered, and your brain is at ease. You keep playing, but something has settled. You're now moving forward because the game told you to. Super Metroid doesn't let that loop cease, and it accomplishes this through a mechanical architecture so silently constructed, you don't realize it's happening until you're there hours in, it's midnight, and you just need to see what's behind one more door. Hidden throughout Zebes are all sorts of secrets. Right now we're starting with the small ones. Bomb a tile and find a pipe to a missile. Break an entire wall down and find more power bombs. Shooting a cracked tile when the ceiling reveals an energy tank. There is lots of cracked tiles, but that run rewarded you. The game doesn't tell you anything like this exists. The first time you find such a secret, it feels like your discovery. Hell, it still does the 44th time. Maybe you were experimenting, rolling through a room you'd already cleared, not looking for anything in particular, and then the wall gives way. The game is training you for this. Not through dialogue or any real obvious hint, it's simple reward. You went looking and something was there, so you sniff about again, and again. Slowly, without a single word, you've been taught a new way of reading the world. This is the micro layer, the moment to moment. Small surprises and rewards, a constant low-level question that buzz in the background of your mind. Can I fit in there? Can I jump there? Is that wall actually solid? The next layer is the map. Pull it out and it's telling you two things at once. What you know and what you don't. Explored rooms show up in pink. Unexplored rooms show up in dark blue. If you're found map data anyway. Otherwise, they ain't there. Then there's the dot. Any room that contains an item, big or small, has a single white dot inside it on the map. The dot doesn't disappear when you find it, which means that's on you to keep track of. The map is giving you just enough information to make you responsible for the rest. That dot is doing something precise. It's not telling you what's there. It's telling you something is there. It also doesn't tell you the number. A room could have multiple items inside it, so you're always unsure if it's a larger room. A waypoint marker closes curiosity. A simple white dot opens it. You now have a question the game has no intention of answering for you. The most elegant version of this is what Meridia offers up. Lower Meridia is the darkest depths of Zebes. Not the literal depths, that's Norfair. But Meridia sure feels like the depths. It's dark, dingy, and the sand is flowing from the ceiling above, where you can actually fall through. The long elevator ride from the wrecked ship adds to the feel as well. At a rather quick pace, it simply stops giving you anywhere to go. You've cleared what you can clear. The map shows rooms you've been in and rooms you haven't. And somewhere in the back of your head, you know there should be more. There's always more. The hint has been sitting there since long before you arrived. Back in the upper portion of the world, there sits a glass pipe surrounded by water that connects Brinstar and Norfair. You can see beyond it. A lone platform is above. It looks like a place to be explored, and the walls go off your TV screen. Open your map from that glass pipe early in the game, and there's a single tile sitting alone, isolated, disconnected from anything around it. You shrug it away. You move on. Hours later, standing in Lower Meridia, running out of options, that glass room might resurface in the back of your mind. The glass itself also helps. It's the only see-through room in the entire game. And glass has one reaction to bombs. You could figure this out. It's logical, but also because the game taught you to think like this, through hours of rewarding your experiments. The tile on the map was the question. The glass was the answer you already had from life. You just needed to put them together in the moment. When that glass cage shatters and a whole new zone opens up above you, the game didn't give you that. You reached out and made it yours. This is a good time to point out how organic the world is. Zebes doesn't organize itself like a map of counties with clear borders. The zones bleed through each other. Brinstar connects to Crateria above, Norfair below, and has a hidden passage midsection that drops into Meridia. A water zone most players don't find for an embarrassingly long time, including me. I described the hints, and they are there, but putting it together, even for this old hair, still takes time. I'm sure those of you as kids took even longer. The junctions are almost never at the obvious ends of a zone. They're buried deep inside other ones, which means the first time you cross a border, you frequently don't realize you've crossed it until the color palette has already changed around you. You didn't go through a door with the game announcing Brinstar. You just noticed, gradually, that the walls turned into green moss. Even certain biomes are diverse. Norfair transforms from fire to strange alien-like bubbles. Brinstar moss gets taken over by spores to hint at the boss. And I've already mentioned Meridia. This is why backtracking never quite feels like backtracking. The path from Meridia back to Crateria can use completely different rooms than the path that brought you there. The map you understood on your first visit and the map you understand on your second are very different experiences. The world isn't the one changing, it's you. Now I want to be honest about the one place this system broke down for me, because it's important to say when design fails. In Lower Norfair, there's a gap above some lava, a narrow passage with these jumping slime creatures called boyons, bouncing around in the molten rock. I ended up going in the lava, jumped and morphed while being damage boosted through it, took the hits and pushed past it, and kept moving. I wasn't supposed to be able to do that. If that gap had been one single tile higher, I couldn't have cleared it. I'd have been forced to go back and found what I was actually supposed to find. But it wasn't. So I went through feeling confused. What followed was well over an hour of wandering through rooms I didn't have the right abilities for, understanding nothing, and repeatedly returning to the entry point because the curiosity loop the game was working to build in me was still running. It must have something. Rooms are something, and they always do. You went back and there was always something. This was the one room that didn't so far. There wasn't. I'd broken the sequence without knowing it. Eventually I gave up and found the answer online. The ice beam was hidden in the room just before that lava stretch, tucked behind a wall of holes, one of which opened into a completely separate screen. It was genuinely hidden. I'm sure I'd have noticed it if I wasn't able to leave that room. The relief when I finally had it was real, but the hour plus before it had drained the satisfaction down considerably. In a way, the curiosity engine didn't fail though. I was still curious the entire time. What failed was the game's promise that curiosity would be rewarded with progress. The loop requires trust, and for that stretch of Norfair, the game accidentally broke it. Through an oversight, the devs did hours upon hours of collective testing, but things still can slip through. The fact that this is the only place in the entire game where I felt that way is itself a kind of evidence. This point to failure was felt so much more because everything else around it was so consistent. In contrast, though, I did a secret break myself at one point on purpose. Within Norfair is a pit of spikes with points to grapple above. I didn't have the grapple hook yet, but I did know about the wall jump even before our Edakun friends demonstrated it. It's not like Mario's, this one has tricky timing. You need to get Samus into a spin animation and then press the opposite direction and jump with extremely precise timing. It took me a good 10 minutes before I made it up that wall. Through the door and got the wave beam early. This one gave a great sense of accomplishment. I was powered up beyond where I should be, in reward for knowledge and creativity. None of this happened by accident. During development, Sakamoto and his team held what they called running meetings. Staff members and others they knew, who hadn't played the game, would sit down and go through it from start to finish, while the rest of the team watched. Not to test for bugs, but to watch how someone who didn't know the answers moved through the world. To see where the curiosity engine fired and where it stalled. Sakamoto would also take the game home and have his wife play it. She had no connection to the development, no insider knowledge, no reason to be patient with anything that didn't work. She became so important to them, the team jokingly called her the Shadow Director. They often went outside the gaming sphere. This concept of exploration wasn't derived from other games. Sakamoto and his producer Gunpei Yokoi described wanting to recreate the feeling of children exploring caves and forests, building a mental map of somewhere genuinely unknown. That specific psychology of entering an unfamiliar physical space, making sense of it piece by piece, slowly converting chaos into something that feels like home. They were trying to reconstruct a universal feeling and put it in a cartridge. The loop you experienced, that curiosity, that surprise, that reward, that opens the next question. It wasn't assembled from game design theory, it was reverse engineered from what it felt like to be a kid in a place that you didn't know yet. Design theory only came after. When players started breaking that loop during testing, things like accessing areas out of order, experimenting in ways the intended path never anticipated, the team didn't patch it out. They built the stages around the awareness that their players would push. The sequence breaks aren't oversights that survive shipping. The same instinct that made them watch strangers play from start to finish is the same instinct that kept them from punishing curiosity when it went further than anticipated. I told you at the start that I'm not intrinsically motivated in video games. That's not me flaunting a disguised ego or a setup for a punchline. It's just how I'm wired. Give me a character I care about, a story pulling me forward, a clear external reason to keep moving, and I'm all in. Take those away and I've exited stage left within the first hour. Super Metroid has none of that, and I played it to completion, and then sat down to write 17 pages of notes about it. So what actually happened? When I say I need external motivation in video games, what I actually mean is I need extrinsic motivation. Points, story, goals, rewards, things outside the act of playing that justify the gameplay. Curiosity is different. Curiosity is self-justifying. You don't need a reason to open a door when you genuinely need to know what's behind it. Motivation can wear out though. You might lose faith in the story, stop caring about the character, decide the reward isn't worth the effort. Curiosity is self-replenishing. Every answer generates a new question. The engine we talked about. It's a psychological one. It's the game making you want to push yourself. This is rarer than it sounds. Minecraft fails and the big empty open worlds of today do nothing for me. It also explains something I couldn't account for early in the playthrough. Why I kept going back when I didn't have an obvious next objective. In most games, that feeling is a signal to stop. Here, it was an invitation. The game answers this in a very specific way, even if it doesn't name it. I've decided to call it Curious Unease. You feel it the moment Samus lands. The long silence, rain falling whether you're there or not, the crumbling ruins of whatever was here before. Whatever lived here once and doesn't anymore. It's not threatening exactly. In fact, the game never is actively trying to scare you. It's more that the world is indifferent to your arrival, and that indifference has a texture. You're in a place that has a history you're not privy to. The planet doesn't care that you're here. It just exists. Unease without fear keeps you alert without panicking. It sharpens attention. You start noticing things, like a passage you can't enter yet, an enemy behaving in a way you don't understand, a room that seems too large for what's in it. The curiosity engine needs you paying attention to fire correctly. The atmosphere is what keeps you in that state. The wrecked ship is where this reaches its peak in my opinion, and it's worth spending time here because what happens in that zone is special. The power's out and the music dissolves into ambient static, noticeably not silence. It's the sound of systems that used to work not working. A three-headed ghost appears behind Samus at intervals. The whole place has the quality of somewhere that recently stopped being inhabited, which is somehow more unsettling than somewhere that was never inhabited at all. Then you walk to the save station and it doesn't work. This is the one that gets you. Zebes is already a strange place. It's dark, and a ghost-like being isn't outside the spectrum of what the planet could offer. But the save station isn't a part of this world. It's a pipeline between you and the game. It's the most basic of deals a game can make with the player, saving your progress. Even though many titles, including this one, try to dress it up, we still suspend our disbelief for such a feature. The wrecked ship quietly breaks that pact without a word of explanation. And the psychological effect is immediate. It's the removal of a safety net. You don't have full awareness, you're depending on it. That save station was disabled on purpose. Isolation comes from more than being alone with spooky decor. When you defeat the boss and the power comes back on, it's relief like little other. Still, my heart goes out to the few kids who just reached this ship and then bitch mommy told them to stop. Why you're best off playing late at night like me. I want to raise something the game does that I can't think of another doing quite the same way. It gives you time to breathe. The whole thing plays out like a silent movie you control. Most games are terrified of leaving space between beats. There's always something happening. An enemy, a collectible, the protagonist shouting an instruction at you, a piece of story, a sound cue pulling your attention elsewhere. Super Metroid has built-in air, long elevator rides, walls you spend a few seconds just climbing, large rooms with nothing in them except the ambient hum of a world that existed before you arrived. It's the game giving you time to reflect. More than any other game, I found myself wondering, what is Samus thinking when a Chozo statue was suddenly carrying her along? Why did she come to trust that one when at the beginning of the game another attacked her? What was she feeling as she saw Metroids are in fact on this planet despite being exterminated in the last title? Yes, I know there is lore reasons after searching online. That ain't the point. To answer these questions, to have defined cutscenes would remove the wonder of this experience. To keep people curious, to keep them under the spell, not every question should be answered. Gameplay questions are rightfully answered. Story ones are not. There's a lot of unanswered questions in real life. The one thing it does make Samus come across as is very stoic. You could say it's just a game, of course she wouldn't react. But then why do I ponder this about Super Metroid in particular? We don't wonder what Mario felt upon landing on an airship, or what Sonic is thinking as Knuckles turns against Robotnik. The difference here isn't that Super Metroid's story is better. It creates the conditions for you to project your thoughts. It's a design choice. Like a Thelonious Monk track, there is air to breathe between, space to take everything in. It's embodied in the world itself. Virtually no other game from this era or any era trusts a player enough to do that. In fact, I can tell you the exact moment it stopped being a game I was playing and became something that had actually gotten me. I'd been wandering Lower Meridia for a while, far longer than I'd like to admit, going back and forth between the extreme left and right sides, through that awful quicksand. At some point, I pushed all the way to the left side of the zone and saw something through a gate that looked familiar. I was convinced I was looking at the other side of Brinstar. I wasn't. It was the underwater portion of Meridia viewed from the wrong angle. And I'd completely misread my geography. I held that hint till now on purpose, to give a slight taste of how long it can take for everything to come together and form a new context. So I ran all the way back to Brinstar to try and find my way around, convinced it would hold the answer. The Mossy Abyss offered up tons of unexplored areas with my new set of abilities. Tons of things I'd missed: energy tanks, missiles, power bomb upgrades, you name it. Passage after passage of newly explorable area. The most wondrous thing tucked in there, however, was a small group of creatures called the Edicoons, who ran to a section of close walls and started jumping off them back and forth. They were inviting me to try. I already knew about the wall jump as mentioned earlier, but the display was nonetheless adorable, and they gave me a power bomb for making my way up the grassy tower. Needless to say, the actual answer was to go bomb the glass tube, which gives a spectacular animation as reward for grinding the brain. It's all a lovely diversion, nonetheless. This wasn't Metroid at its highest artistic peak exactly. The wrecked ship was the most atmospheric. Kraid is the most dramatic. That hour or so running around with no exact objective, uncovering constant secrets, following creatures, that's a Metroidvania at its most distilled. That was the curiosity engine running on all cylinders. And somewhere in the middle of it, I thought, this is what they were building towards. Curiosity, surprise, reward. Repeat until the planet explodes. That's when I came up with it. Not as a critical framework, or maybe I was, but it's all towards an explanation for why I couldn't stop. I was feeling like a genius, and the game had arranged every single thing to make me feel exactly that way. And I hadn't noticed it happening until it already grabbed me. That's a delightful trap of gaming. Super Metroid does have one problem, a glaring problem, and it's a combat problem. And the issue is, it doesn't feel like combat. It feels like pointing a flashlight at things until they evaporate. You shoot an enemy, and it flashes white, and then you shoot it again, and it flashes white again. At some point the enemy finally dies and leaves a health orb behind. There's no crunch, no impact. No sense that anything you're firing actually connects with something tangible on the receiving end. The beam weapons in particular are almost apologetically weightless. The standard laser hits a space pirate with all the authority of a politely worded memo. Even the ice beam doesn't do much, but they are neat. Turning baddies into platforms you step on is really cool. But the feedback is still near nothing. The audio it produces sounds more like a baby's toy. I mention that for a reason. The audio is the real culprit. A good contact sound does more work than any animation frame. I say that as someone who identifies as an animator. You can shake the screen, you can add explosions, it will all feel like a dramatic wet towel without the audio sensory to elevate it. The game is so good at atmosphere and so bad at this one specific thing that the contrast is almost surreal. You're standing in a beautifully rendered, deeply unsettling alien corridor, and you're shooting things with a weapon that sounds like someone tapping a desk with a pencil. The missile is the one exception. They have weight because said missiles sound like they have weight. That low percussion thud when a rocket connects is the only thing in this game's combat where you think, yes, that landed. Everything else is doing damage on a wavelength that your nervous system cannot feel. Then there's the select button. To switch between your weapons, you press select. At the start of the game, this is fine. Plenty of games from these decades used it. It's called select after all. But as your arsenal grows, it becomes a real problem. At its worst, in a boss fight, you're on your beam, press select to reach missiles, press again for super missiles, again for power bombs, again for the grapple, again for the X-ray, and finally back to the beam. 6 presses to get back where you started, while a boss is actively trying to send you to a game over. The main reason they included the ability to disable accessories in the menu is almost certainly because of this exact problem, by letting you cut the rotation down to something functional. The Super NES controller left them no other choice. After all, L and R were already taken by aiming. I can't even think of a good solution to it. Whether or not they had no other choices due to limitations, it still causes a problem. The one feature very much worth praising is the extensive options to completely customize what button does what. This still somehow isn't standard today, let alone in 1994. It's extremely forward-thinking. None of this matters when Samus is moving, at least. The combat is weak, but the movement is convincing. She has inertia. She turns like she weighs something. You're thinking about where you're going, how you're getting there, what that ledge is for, whether you can make that gap from here. It has a learning curve. She feels heavy in the grapple beams. Swing physics are odd, but once you learn, Samus feels great to move around those tunnels. While the combat is being quietly disappointing, the soundtrack is doing something genuinely extraordinary in the background, and it deserves more credit than it usually gets for carrying the game's atmosphere. I hinted at this with the shipwreck before. Kenji Yamamoto and Minako Hamano composed Super Metroid's score with a unique philosophy. Most games of this era use music to make you feel upbeat, with driving melodies, clear emotional cues, and soundtracks that announce themselves. Super Metroid uses sound to tell you where you are. Take the title screen. Before you've touched a button, you're watching the camera push slowly through a laboratory of some sort. 1994 it says, the year it came out. Followed by Nintendo being typed. It passes by again, presented in red letters. Then it shows the whole scene. Super Metroid. Revealing a dead scientist next to a Metroid in a case. This ain't your average Nintendo game. The music that plays under this is brooding, with a main motif that's somehow both urgent and slightly sorrowful. It has already told you something terrible happened here before the image confirmed it. The music and the revelation land at the same moment. Then Samus lands on Criteria, and the soundtrack does something extra. It almost disappears. What you hear on the surface of Zebes isn't silence. It's the sound of rain and crashing thunder coming through the Super NES hardware. It sounds like some strange combination of analog and digital, and you can't fully tell if you're hearing nature or static. Both, really. It creates the kind of welcome no standard melody could produce. This sounds like a place that was here before you and will be here after. Limitations creating happy accidents. Yamamoto understood something that Breath of the Wild, for all its ambition, got wrong. The Zelda title committed so fully to minimalism that it forgot to have songs. You'd cross a field for 10 minutes with ambient wind and a single piano note arriving every 30 seconds, like the music had a timer. I respect the philosophy, but it lost something essential in being so strict. Super Metroid doesn't make that mistake. Underneath all the atmosphere, there are actual songs. Defined, melodic, structured compositions you could whistle back to someone who never played the game. Brinstar's red swampy area has a pulsing drone built on 2 chords separated by a half step, a choir sample, a gentle flute, and a piano melody sitting above it is simultaneously eerie and beautiful, the kind of track that gets buried in your subconscious after one listen. Then walk from that area into the overgrown mossy section and the music shifts completely. Rhythmic drum beats, atmospheric synths, isolation somehow wrapped in a groove. Same section of the map with an entirely different emotional energy. This is a composer who understands that Zebes isn't one place, but many biomes that happen to be connected. The game knows when it wants to be texture and when to take the mic. The confidence of switching is what makes both modes work. It never tips too far in either direction. It's commonly known that Sakamoto is something of a film buff, in that he has cited the Alien franchise as a core aesthetic reference. It's all over the place visually, and it explains the game's atmospheric feel. The idea of a hostile, biomechanical world that operates according to its own internal logic, and where the environment itself is as dangerous as any specific enemy. What is less discussed is someone whose name doesn't come up often enough in Super Metroid discussions. Dario Argento is an Italian filmmaker, a master of the giallo genre, which, to keep it short, sits somewhere between psychological thriller and horror, known for its architectural obsession and its use of space as a carrier of dread. Films like Deep Red and Suspiria, in an Argento film, the building knows something the person inside it doesn't yet. Rooms carry secrets that predate the protagonist's arrival. Things feel wrong before you can articulate why. The camera lingers on details that seem significant before their significance is revealed. I'm sure you're picking up on the influence already. Sakamoto named Argento directly in interviews as a creative influence. And once you know that, his rooms become quite different to look at. Deep Red is built around a protagonist who walks past a crucial piece of information early in the film, and doesn't understand what he witnessed until much later. The meaning was always present. He simply didn't have the context yet. In fact, he does this a few times throughout this film in particular. This is precisely how Super Metroid is structured. You walk past the answers before the questions are formed, return with new abilities, and the room you thought you understood reveals what it was always holding. A good example of this is the long red soil drop from Brinstar. The first time you're going to Norfair, you fall and fall, needing to avoid a bunch of floating bugs called rippers. On this first drop, they seem like simple hazards to weave between. Maybe you notice you can't kill them with your blaster, but that ain't so strange in video games. You go into Norfair and acquire the Ice Beam. When you see them with his new weapon, you understand the context. Alien gave this game its visuals, and the hostile world operating on its own internal logic. But Argento gave it something different. He gave it the architecture of unease, the quality of a space that feels watched. Feels like it has a history you're only partially privy to. He influenced more of the gameplay structure. If you're interested in experiencing Argento's films, apart from Deep Red or Suspiria, I would personally highly recommend Four Flies on Grey Velvet. Noticed almost none of its most distinctive qualities come from looking at other games. The atmosphere comes from film, the philosophy of its exploration comes from childhood memories. The emotional core comes from human relationships. The mechanical innovations like Shine Spark and Spring Ball come from pushing the fresh hardware's engine to see what it could do, which is itself engineering as inspiration rather than game as inspiration. Avoiding taking inspiration too much from the same medium prevents tunnel vision and creates a more unique work of art. Artists need to experience life, interact with the world, and keep an open mind to be truly inspired. Super Metroid is a game made by people with passion, and it goes far beyond the crunch time where they slept piled up and together. You can see and feel it in the visuals. Each zone of Zebes has its own color language. The sickly purples and greens of Brinstar, the deep reds and blacks of Norfair, the dark dunes of Lower Meridia. None of it feels like an art director picking from a palette wheel. It's more like a place that was always this color, before you got there and after you leave. Everything is organic even when man-made. It's been corroded by the passage of time. These details came at a cost. The team knew they would need the storage. There was a new 24 megabit cartridge that held the answer, but they would need that permission from the top rank. This wasn't a passive choice and came at significant production cost, particularly for a game that already got a lukewarm blessing to even start. Still, they got it, and it paid off, allowing the artist to construct the map and take full advantage of parallax scrolling. The underwater sections of Meridia have 3 distinct layers moving independently, creating the sense of depth receding behind Samus. The layer in Lower Norfair glows with a light source that doesn't exist in the foreground. The wrecked ship's forgotten corridors have a gray-blue tint that feels like the light is wrong, that whatever produced this coloring wasn't natural or intentional. The bosses don't move according to attack patterns, it's more like a performance. Ridley swoops with menace. The Crocomire tries desperately to get revenge in his final moments. Of course they do attack in patterns, just it doesn't quite feel like it, does it? Samus gets unique outfits and details on her armor with each upgrade acquired. You can even turn them off individually and it's reflected in her sprite. Kraid's lair is a great example of where everything, sound, architecture, color, and history, converges into something special. Samus is welcomed through a door shaped like a threatening alien face. This area announces itself as something that consumes. Inside of the broken halls of what reads as a former laboratory, sterile structures being slowly overtaken by vegetation. Whatever happened here wasn't recent, but it wasn't that long ago either. The plants are still growing, space pirates move through the corridors in high numbers, which tells you something valuable is being protected, or maybe contained. Brinstar's Red Swamp song continues to play, the drones and choir chants echoing through the halls. A small Kraid blocks your path midway through, firing spikes at you. If you play the original Metroid, you know Kraid. You might think this is him. It isn't. The game is using your own knowledge against you, letting you believe you've already cleared the threats so that what comes next hits harder. Before the boss door, there's a Marine. I believe a Galactic Federation soldier, dead on the floor, covered in insects that scatter as you approach. No explanation, no log entry. Just a person who came here for a reason and didn't leave. His mission might have been exactly what Samus's is. The game says nothing about it. Then you enter the lair, and Kraid doesn't strut in. He erupts from the floor like the planet itself is expelling something that it's keeping down. He grows and keeps growing, towers above Samus, even above the screen, until the scale is genuinely overwhelming. This creature that in the original game was the same height as Samus is now something that makes her look like an insect. He fires claw-like daggers from his belly buttons in disgusting fashion. The sequence is a precisely constructed escalation of dread that uses every tool in the game's arsenal simultaneously, telling you something was coming long before you arrived. It's surprising how much this takes advantage of the knowledge of players who experienced the original Metroid. This is long, long before nostalgia baiting, and it does this far better than any modern ones trying it. The reason is simple. The game's first item, the Morph Ball, is found in the same spot as the original game. The very ruins of Brinstar. It's falling apart now and gives off an air of anxiety. You're not sure what will be happening here. Then a few hours later, Kraid appears, and this time he's towering far above the screen. In the original, he's the same height as Samus. This new Kraid scared my friend so much as a kid, he claims he turned off the console. Kraid and all the other bosses have such fantastic, memorable designs. While the standard enemies for the most part are little bugs, the bosses stick in everyone's brains, and it's no wonder some have become mascot-level icons for the series. The Phantoon's giant squid-like head, the Crocomire's body that looks like it was melting before he even got pushed into the lava. It has insectoid arms with a reptile's body. You gotta wonder how they hold him up. And the Spore Spawn. Much as I hate this thing, the way the pod opens and looks at Samus is quite unnerving. That's the thing about passion. It doesn't usually show up in a features list. It's the flicker of a boss's eyeball, the rain that welcomes you to the surface, the extra roar effect the boss gives on death, the small details. Few players will consciously notice these while they're trying to not get murdered by a space pirate. Still, we all feel it, and it adds a lot to the total experience. There's a structure to what Super Metroid does to you. I don't know if it's accidental, but it's not subtle once you see it. And you won't see it while it's happening. Let's walk through it in 4 phases. Phase 1. Alienation. You arrive on Zebes with limited abilities, no map, and no guidance. The environment is indifferent to your presence. Rain falls whether you're there or not. Creatures attack without malice. Rooms exist that you plainly cannot enter. The world is not hostile, it's simply not yours. This is the feeling of isolation. Not that the world rejects you, but that it doesn't yet recognize your existence. The map in this phase is almost entirely fogged. Your arsenal is thin. You take damage from things you don't comprehend yet. The overwhelming feeling isn't fear exactly. It's the very specific anxiety of not knowing the rules of the place you're already in. Samus came here with her own problem. The planet Zebes doesn't have anything against her. It just exists. Phase 2. Negotiation. This is far and away the longest phase in the very heart of the game. Slowly, through exploration and ability acquisition, the player begins to build a working relationship with Zebes. A new beam weapon means certain enemies become trivial. The Varia suit means heat damage stops. The grapple beam means that impassable chasm is now a path. Each upgrade is a negotiation. The world offers you access in exchange for persistence. Notably, this phase is non-linear. The player doesn't go zone by zone taking it over like a military campaign. You weave through it. You backtrack through rooms you've already seen, and they look different now. Not because they changed, but because you did. The world is the same, your relationship to it isn't. Everything slowly comes into a new context, even rooms that are from the original Metroid. This is how real-world negotiation works when dealing with an overwhelming environment. You don't work in a linear manner, it's spirals, walking through rooms that slowly become more and more familiar, revisiting what was once chaos, understanding it, and finding it starts to make sense when placed into the larger framework. That leads us to Phase 3, Ownership. Then one day, without announcement, Zebes is yours. You can't point to the exact moment it happened, but somewhere along the line, the map stopped being a mystery and became a home. The corridors you once got lost in are shortcuts now. The enemies you once feared are minor interruptions. You know where everything is, you know what everything does. The planet that refused to acknowledge your existence has become, through sheer accumulated time and stubbornness, the place you belong. This is ownership, the kind that lives in your hands, memory, and heart. The kind nobody can take from you, except they can, and they will. Phase 4. Grief. The mother-brain fight should be the ending. You've beaten her before, in the first game. You know how this goes, except this time, she stands up, grows a body, and beats Samus to the floor until she can't move. Health drains. The player can't act. Some of the development team pushed back on this moment. They said being unable to do anything isn't good game design. Sakamoto insisted, because the helplessness wasn't a game design choice. It was an emotional one. You needed to be genuinely desperate for what comes next to mean anything. And just before it's over, something drops from the ceiling. The baby Metroid. The creature Samus flew across the galaxy to recover. The thing that imprinted on Samus like she was their mother. Because as far as they knew, she was. They latch onto Mother Brain and drain them completely, and then they turn to Samus. Broken. Dying from the effort. And gives her everything they have left. Health, energy, one last gift. And then, the baby is gone. You didn't get to save it, you got saved by it. That's not the ending you negotiated for. That's not how any of this was supposed to go. Samus slays Mother Brain with the last gift from what was most precious to her. And then the timer starts, and Zebes begins to die with it. And now the grief doubles, because the planet is yours, and it's burning, and you have to run through every corridor you mastered without time to grieve any of them. Just like Samus has no time to grieve the baby Metroid. You sprint to your ship because there's nothing else to do. Samus escapes with her life, and that's it. The map you filled in over 10 hours of your actual time on this planet is ash. Buddhism has a word for what's happening here. Dukkha. Dukkha is specifically the suffering that comes directly from attachment. From the gap between what we have and what we want to keep. It's the particular pain of loving something in a world where nothing is permanent. Super Metroid engineered dukkha. You don't suffer the loss of the baby Metroid because it was narratively important. You suffer it because the game lets something imprint on you the same way that baby imprinted on Samus, and then it took that thing away before you were ready. You don't suffer the loss of Zebes because the game was sad. You suffer it because it handed you a world, piece by piece, room by room, upgrade by upgrade, and let you believe it was yours to keep. The curiosity engine from Pass 1. Curiosity, surprise, and reward. That loop with no natural exit point wasn't just good exploration design. It was the construction of attachment. Every reward that opened a new question, every dark blue silhouette that turned pink, every room you came to own, it was all a setup. The attachment was being built the entire time. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy feeling like a genius. Buddhism isn't saying attachment is wrong. It says attachment is the nature of conscious beings in relationship with the world. That understanding impermanence doesn't mean refusing to love things. It means loving them with open hands. Samus doesn't hold the baby Metroid at a distance to protect herself from losing them. She cared for them, and part of that love, when it comes, is loss. The player doesn't hold Zebes at emotional distance to protect themselves from the ending. You aren't even aware it's happening. You fill in every room on the map, and then you watch it burn. This is why the baby Metroid's arc is so resonant. In the original NES Metroid, Metroids are a pure threat and creatures to be destroyed. After the sequel and by Super Metroid, a Metroid becomes the thing Samus loves most and loses most completely. The attachment was formed through proximity and care, not through choice. This is exactly how the deepest attachments form in human experience. You didn't decide to love the place you grew up. You loved it because you were there long enough. The player didn't decide to love Zebes. They loved it because they came to know it. Yet not everything can be saved. What is it that can be? There's one huge thing the game never tells you. Hidden along the escape route, just out of the way, are the Edecuns and Dachoras, the creatures who taught you the wall jump, who demonstrated the shine spark without a word of instruction. The ones whose knowledge became yours during the negotiation phase, woven into your hands and muscle memory long before the ending arrived. They're still there trying to survive. Most players don't know for years, if ever. Blow open a hole during the escape, and they get out on their own. If you do it right, as the planet goes, there's a tiny dot shooting out from the edge of the explosion. That's them. The world is ash. Samus's baby is gone. The map you built over 10 hours is burning. But the ones who taught you how to move through it, if you knew, if someone told you, if you went back for them in the chaos, they make it out. They carry forward. Not as a trophy or a consolation, just as a quiet fact about what survives the changes of life. Zebes couldn't be kept. But what it taught you, what they taught you, that goes with you forward. Knowledge and traditions pass on, even as the world that held it burns. That's the one thing the timer can't take. The world was always going to be lost. The game just never told you what could still be saved. The cruelest thing this game does is also the truest thing it sculpts. It teaches you, without a single word of dialogue, one of the oldest lessons there is. Nothing in life is permanent. Surprise is the moment the world asserts its strangeness over you. Curiosity is the act of pushing back against it. Reward is the moment you gain ground. And when the loop finally closes, when that entire map is lit, when the planet explodes behind you as Samus sprints to the ship, the whole arc arrives at once. The game was always going to end here. In grief, in motion, with no time to stop. You were never going to save it. This is why Super Metroid endures. Not because it has great mechanics. It does. Not because it has great atmosphere. It does. But because it makes you feel something true about what it means to be alive in a world that doesn't last. Alongside Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Super Metroid practically founded an entire genre. The Metroidvania is more popular now than ever. Hundreds, if not thousands of games carry the tag on Steam. Some of them are genuinely extraordinary. Hollow Knight delivers grief that surprises. Ori and the Blind Forest opens with one of the most emotionally direct sequences in gaming. And plenty of others in the genre achieve real depth. It's beautiful to see it keep blossoming, and I'm sure it will keep on moving forward. In Super Metroid, it would go on to sell 1.4 million copies. Modest by the standards of a console with 50 million sold. It was released late in the Super NES lifecycle, with the N64 already announced. And yet word of mouth, emulation later on, virtual console re-releases, 30 years of people telling their friends. There's just one little thing that kept sticking in my mind. After everything, after the baby is gone, and Zebes is ash, and you've escaped with nothing but your life, players kept coming back. The speedrunning community built an entire library of techniques the developers never designed. Sequence breaks, mock balls, shine sparks that break Zebes, routing that compresses and rearranges the intended experience into something new. The one that stuck out to me was the space-time beam. It's a glitch. A strange, beautiful, and easy to pull off glitch that does something completely unplanned. Equip the right combination of items in the right order in one of the few rooms in the game where the conditions align. Fire your laser, walk through a door, then the game chugs and resets. Not to the title screen, to the beginning, with everything you've earned intact. Every boss and item comes back to be fought and added to your arsenal. The world that burned is suddenly inexplicably unburned. Not even a space pirate in sight. It's like being handed a key to a place you were told you could never return to. Save your game anywhere, and when you reload, you're back to the opening cutscene with everything in your arsenal except regular missiles. Power bombs and everything else remains, allowing Samus to access anywhere you please. Get revenge on that damn Spore boss. Nobody designed this. It emerged. Players found it through the same instinct the game spent hours building in them. The simple concept that if you press far enough into the unknown, something will be there waiting for you, and something was. An accidental new game plus. An emergent secret. A world that keeps offering itself back to the people who loved it enough to keep looking. It amazes me. A game this precisely constructed where every system points at the same emotional destination. It somehow produced a glitch that lets you start over without losing what you built, as if the world itself resisted being ash. Despite the fact it says "See you next" mission at the end, Sakamoto intended Super Metroid to be a finale. The Metroids were always destined to be exterminated. He wanted to end it in the most beautiful form. It wasn't the end. The series continued, the genre it founded kept growing, and 30 years later people are still finding new things inside that same cartridge. You were meant to lose this world, but we just couldn't stop coming back. Hey there, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing for more, dropping a comment, and maybe even ring that bell. It really means a lot that you made it this far. As you can tell, I handled the script in a very different way from my usual videos. I dived more into the themes and emotions of the game. Super Metroid has been talked about so many different ways, I knew I had to try and bring something unique. Hopefully it worked out. As for what else I'm plugging away on, obviously I'm continuing with Sonic and hoping to get CD done this year. Also, a couple other games I got scripts basically complete for I can work on. We'll see how things fall into place. I'm sure I'll feel a lot better when CD is finished. Super Metroid got done here because I consider this a sort of add-on, as playing this helped me put together my thoughts for that title, since both are exploration of the 2D plane. Whatever happens out there, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.